Hello. So this is the grab bag, and I'm going to be talking about a few subjects. I'm going to be talking about Rupert Lowe and Nigel Farage's row in the Reform Party and the resignation of Justin Castro and the new Prime Minister of Canada. Not necessarily in that order. I'll have to make up my mind about that. After that, I'm going to be talking about Canadians who want to be part of America, the Lucy Letby case, which still won't go away, the Waitrose wine expert that got sacked for passing along a Daily Telegraph cartoon, the ambulance service talking about people with breasts, and a variation on the man bites dog story that is the holy grail of journalism. I'm Granniopteryx. I'm on YouTube, Rumble, BitChute and Minds. So, this being the grab bag is just a whole lot of stories that have caught my attention and which I may not have had time or not time to deal with in depth, or indeed have not been able to research enough to make a decent video out of it. But still, they need mentioning. And of course, I'm a bit conflicted. What do I start with? The internecine row between Farage and Lowe, or the removal of Justin Castro from Canada? And the emplacement of
execute the powers and trust
Mark Carney. So which one should I start with? Well, I've got Farage and Lowe there, so I might as well start with them. But there's really quite a lot to say about this. It says here, the BBC, of course, would put it this way, but they're not wrong. A public spat involving the leader of Reform UK and one of the party's other high-profile MPs has caught the attention of political figures as much as constituents. It's a really serious row. And the serious row, people at the BBC, I suppose, I haven't read all of this, but they would frame it as a personality clash between an overextended, bloated Nigel Farage, bloated with his sense of power, and a renegade like Rupert Lowe. But it isn't that. And just a minute, I'm going to show you exactly what it is.
It's a political impossibility to deport hundreds of thousands of people. We simply can't do it. At the moment, it's a political impossibility.
But is it your ambition?
No.
And what Rupert Lowe says is that it isn't an impossibility and it should be done. He says that there are migrants in this country that are here illegally and don't belong here and should be removed. And there is a problem with removing migrants, of course, and that is that many of them lie about where they've come from. So somebody says he's come from Afghanistan when he's actually come from Bulgaria or something, and he's thrown away all his papers. How do you know where to deport him? And that is going to be a problem. But I don't think it's an impossibility. The Pakistanis had a similar problem. Well, it wasn't quite so bad because they knew where everyone was coming from. Yeah, here, this is from a site called foreignpolicy.com, but it's all over the place. Pakistan is expelling nearly 2 million Afghans. The Afghans made a run for Pakistan when the Taliban came in, and now Pakistan is pushing them all back. Well, it knew who they were, mostly. And the fact is that their lives in Afghanistan are going to be 1 million times worse than they were in Pakistan. as bad as Pakistan was. It's not locking women up, for instance. And if you think that's just bad for the women, consider the problem of families where there is no male head of household and children, young boys, have to go out to earn a living because their mothers aren't allowed to do that. So it's bad for everyone. But they are doing it. They don't want these Afghanis in Pakistan. I don't know why, actually, but there they are. They have deported them. So the row between Rupert Lowe and Nigel Farage. Farage says it can't be done. Lowe says it can be done. The UK could do it. Parliament, being sovereign, could rewrite immigration law tomorrow, override obstructing human rights legislation, and begin mass deportations at once. Political will is the only barrier. Weak, cowardly politicians prioritise left-wing lawyers and NGOs over British citizens. And as we're seeing from US aid, there are billions of reasons why. And that is a point. And I have talked about the cowardice of British politicians before. And that clip from Nigel Farage about it being impossible. You know, I very much admire Nigel Farage. This is all when somebody's trying to tear somebody down. You start with, I very much... No, I do admire him. It's possible, though, that he's just getting tired. He has been fighting like a hero for 30 years for British independence. And it's possible he's just become worn down. Anyway, whatever. We can do it if we grit our teeth and are prepared for the optics. And I'm not sure that any political party is. Rupert Lowe says he is, but then he's on the sidelines, you see. He can afford to say that, just like the Labour Party could afford to say that it was terrible what the Conservatives were doing to the pensioners until they got into power and discovered where the sums were. It can be done, for sure. It's going to be very traumatic, though, because whereas people in Pakistan couldn't give a stuff about the Afghanis and don't mind them being moved on and marched out, in Britain it would be optically awful. Just awful. And I think that's possibly what Farage is thinking of. And Rupert Lowe says, no, it's worth the price. So Great Yarmouth MP, now an independent because he was thrown out of the Reform Party, was suspended. Now, this is where something else happens. He was suspended because he was talking about deporting migrants, and this is something that Farage didn't want. But then stories started surfacing about Rupert Lowe, nasty stories like he had some sort of mental deterioration or he'd been harassing people. That I don't know the truth of it, but I suspect they're all lies. And the funny thing is that the Labour Party is jumping in on the act. I think one of the harassment or one of the assaults or whatever that Rupert Lowe has been accused of comes from a Labour Party person from months back. Months. And, the Labour Party would obviously have made much of it at the time if it had really been an issue. So the Labour Party, of course, want the Reform Party out of the way as much as they can because they can see that Reform would win a whole lot of local elections from Labour strongholds, which is why Angela Rayner cancelled. The Labour Party cancelled some local elections. There was a cock and bull story about their redrawing boundaries, so they didn't want to have elections now. It would be a waste of money because in 2 years' time they're going to be redrawing the boundaries and there'd have to be another election. Cobblers. Absolute cobblers. They know that it would be a Reform landslide, or it would have been a Reform landslide if there hadn't been this row between Farage and Lowe. How that's going to pan out, well, we'll have to wait for that. All right. That's the update on the Reform Party problems. It's very disappointing because I was putting my hopes into Reform, and now it's going through an earthquake. And I don't know if anything will be left standing when the earthquake's over. We'll just have to see. I was also, by the way, very disappointed with Isabel Oakeshott, who gave at least one interview which I thought patronising and plain nasty, really bitchy. And up till then, I'd had fairly, well, apart from her marital infidelities, I suppose it's all part of the same thing, really. I'm not going to say any more. OK, next story up. Well, it's this. Now, the thing about Mark Carney, I have to admit, I don't know where he came from. Suddenly, he's the Prime Minister of Canada. Out of nowhere. I don't understand. The last I heard of him, he was head of the Bank of England and slagging off Liz Truss all the time. So this is what he did to Liz Truss. And you know what? If the Conservative Party had stood behind Liz Truss, then we wouldn't be in the fix we are now with the Labour Party. As I said, Michael Gove and Thingy, gosh, I've forgotten his name. Anyway, doesn't matter. There was a plot. They wanted Rishi Sunak. And that was it. They just wanted Rishi Sunak, I suppose because they thought he was more pushable. Anyway, they pushed Liz Truss as well, and they got Mark Carney to come in on the act. And it was, let's hear what Liz Truss had to say about it.
Just wanting to get your thoughts on Mark Carney and your relationship with him while you were Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, and any advice you have to Canadians who think he might make a good Prime Minister.
Well, Mark Carney was Governor of the Bank of England, and under his tenure, too much money was printed, which did damage to the British economy and put our economy off track. He, at the last election, endorsed Rachel Reeves' economic policy. She's now become Chancellor. It's been a disaster for Britain. The country is heading for bankruptcy. So I would strongly recommend not backing Mark Carney or his policies on net zero, which have been disastrous for Britain and would be disastrous for Canada.
Do you trust his judgment overall, outside of ideological considerations?
Well, I believe that he made major mistakes in the management of the Bank of England. He has pushed net zero, which has been a disaster, not just for the UK, but for many countries across the world.
Thanks for your time, Prime Minister. Appreciate it.
And that's Liz Truss on Mark Carney. Pierre Poilievre said that Carney has been wrong about everything.
Well, first of all, you have to ask if you can believe anything he says. Mr. Carney not only advised Justin Trudeau, he was his economic advisor for 5 years, during which time Trudeau killed pipelines and raised carbon taxes. Mr. Carney publicly testified against pipeline construction at the industry committee. He said he's for pipelines when he was in British Columbia speaking English, and then he said he would let provinces veto them when he went to Quebec and was speaking French. He's going to temporarily hide the carbon tax for the election. So the gas prices will drop for 35 days. And then if, God forbid, he wins, he will bring back a much bigger carbon tax with no rebate. He's already said that this tax would apply on things like steel. Well, use steel for everything. Mark Carney has been wrong about everything. He likes to talk about his experience. His experience is being wrong. He was wrong about the carbon tax. He was wrong about pipelines. He was wrong to advise Trudeau for money printing inflation over the last 5 years. He's been wrong in the past, and he's wrong for our future.
That was interesting because Mr. Poilievre said that Carney was wrong about printing money, and so did Liz Truss. So obviously that's something that Mr. Carney thinks is a way out of whatever problem he thinks they have. OK, well, that's it. Mark Carney. And it apparently, some Canadians are so annoyed with what's been going on in their government that they want to annex themselves to America. Look, as bad as your government is, Canada, I would suggest don't annex yourselves to America. I know America has always lusted after Canada. It's true. It's true. You guys in the United States, the 1812 war? Or even before that. It was about Canada, wasn't it? And the Canadians didn't want to be part of the United States. And they have... Canada has its own special flavour, which will, in a couple of generations, be destroyed if you subsume yourselves into the American states. And I might tell you, policies about, for instance, healthcare are completely different in America. I know they're different in Canada as well. There are some things about healthcare there that I disapprove of. But it's not a good idea. It's not even good for America because it's this monoculture idea. It's the reason I didn't want the EU. It's the reason the Soviet Union fell apart. When you impose a monoculture, there's no elasticity anymore in a local economy. Okay, but enough from me. I am no Thomas Sowell. Okay, next story. Well, we're back to Lucy Letby again. Medical experts, it says here, struck by witnesses' lack of expertise at the Letby trial. And it says here, a panel of whenever they say experts, I get really suspicious nowadays because experts seem to know nothing because it was experts who were at the trial as well, wasn't it? Experts reviewing the Lucy Letby baby deaths have said they were struck by what they claim as a lack of expertise of witnesses at her trial and the failure to consider alternative explanations. In an unprecedented intervention last month, I did a video about that. A group of 14 world authorities in neonatology and child health reviewed the 17 deaths and collapses of infants at the Countess of Chester Hospital in 2015 and 2016 and found all had medical explanations. Medical as opposed to how would you put it? The result of human interference. Now, 7 of those involved in the report have told the Telegraph of their concerns and have said they would be prepared to give evidence if the case came back to court. So they would be happy to stand as witnesses for the defence. The safety of Letby's convictions is currently under consideration by the Criminal Cases Review Commission, which investigates potential miscarriages of justice. Professor Jeff Chase, one of the world's foremost experts on the effects of insulin on preterm babies, was asked to look at the cases. And he said he was struck by the lack of consideration of well-known alternatives. And the more he studied it, he realised that the so-called experts were using results that had to do with insulin inconsistencies for adults, not for babies. He says they're not the same as adults. Babies. Big surprise there. Anyway, so he's talking about metabolic modelling, how the metabolism of a body works. And obviously, the babies, he says, are not tiny adults. To remind you, Letby's serving 15 whole life terms for the murder of 7 infants and the attempted murder of 7 more. But since her conviction, dozens of medical and statistical experts have voiced concerns about the evidence. I think a lot of it hinges on the main witness for the prosecution, one Dr. Evans, as far as I remember. Dr. Evans suggested the possibility of air embolus as a cause of death. Now, you know what really struck me about the Letby case? When you have murderers, they tend to use the same methods again and again. If you look at cases of murderers who got caught, generally they got caught because of the same thing happening again and again to a lot of different people. But in the case of Letby, there's a whole library of methods of death. It's like she may have used two, the same, according to them. And that struck me as odd. Either that or Letby was, inordinately inventive. In one case of attempted murder, the statements of the trial experts were inconsistent, incorrect and biased. In a second case, a natural cause of death was much more likely. Dr. Dowie Evans, a paediatrician from Carmarthenshire, was the prosecution's key expert witness, but questions have been raised about his expertise and impartiality. So he talked about air embolus as a cause of death, and Dr. Tetsuya Isayama, head of a division of neonatology at Tokyo's National Centre for Child Health and Development, was asked to look at some of the air embolism cases and said, "I did not find evidence for the conclusions of the trial experts that the cause of death was air injection." And he said he'd be willing to give that evidence as well. Nalini Singhal, a professor emeritus at the University of Calgary and co-editor of World Health Organization Helping Babies Survive programs, said the issue with this case is that some people that gave evidence as experts were really not experts in the field. And then said the legal system needs better ways of identifying who is an expert. So, yeah, as I've said, I've made a couple of videos about it. The first one was after Miss Letby was convicted. And I believe in that video I said, well, she's being convicted. So according to the law, she's guilty. But I'm not so sure. I think that's more or less what I said. But of course, I was no expert. It just seemed there was something wrong somewhere. And then I made another video in which there was a serious attempt by Canadian neonatologists to tear apart this conviction. And at that point, I said, I went through one case, just one case, where it's sort of, there was at least a serious doubt about the conviction. And the point about British law is that you have to be convicted of murder beyond reasonable doubt. And there was definitely a reasonable doubt in the one case that I concentrated on. So that's that one. And obviously these experts found more reasonable doubt. Now, what's next? Here's a story about a Waitrose wine expert who says he was suspended because he shared a Telegraph cartoon. So here is the cartoon. If you're not watching the video, it shows a parent-teachers meeting, and the teacher is looking at these concerned parents over her desk, and she's saying to them, "Your son is falling behind in sex education. He could only name 47 of the 100 different genders. I don't normally talk about private matters, but I need to today. I've been suspended by my employer and they're trying to silence me because of my beliefs. I stand with freedom of speech for everyone." Okay, so his employer is Waitrose. He says Waitrose are trying to silence him. After nearly 30 years of service, they've thrown me to the wolves of the left-wing shit tip, but I will not go without a fight. I will not go silently into the night. If I lose this battle, then we'll all lose the battle for freedom of speech. And then he says they're trying to destroy me, the company that cares about the people who work in it. That's a shame. They only care about their image. That's the story of a man who lost his job because he supports reform and he shared a Telegraph cartoon. Well, that's his story. I'm inclined to believe it because Ben and Wine, he doesn't post rubbish on his X feed. But that's his story. And the next one is the St. John's Ambulance Service, who have decided to call women people with breasts. Now, it's a rather contentious headline. The point is, the point they're making is that some people are not giving women chest compressions and chest, that's the word, chest compressions for heart attacks and that sort of thing, if they're women, because they're worried about touching people with breasts. And so there is sort of a justification for what they're saying. Not enough of a justification, but I can see what's happening here. Activists accuse St John of erasing women from its CPR guide, but the charity says improved wording reflects everybody it seeks to help. No, they should say women, and then they'd have to say because they have breasts. I mean, because people with breasts, they're trying to come up with trans. There's definitely a thing there. They're trying to get the trans people in there as well. My dog has come for a bit of a cuddle. St John's Ambulance has been accused of erasing women. Its website stated it aimed to address the fact that people with breasts are statistically less likely to receive bystander CPR than men. However, gender-critical campaigners said a failure to use the word women in the guide was an unfortunate example of misogyny in a life-or-death situation. I could see where they're coming from, but they really shouldn't have gone there. Gone there. Oh, well. So it says here, the guide also advises readers they should remove bras or binding. So what they're saying here is if this person thinks it's a woman who thinks she's a man and is wearing a breast binder, they should move that. No, they should remove upper clothing. That's it. Any restrictive upper clothing, they could easily say that and there wouldn't have been a problem. If the casualty is wearing one, in order to reach their bare chest. Right, so that's the mealy-mouthed St John's Ambulance. But ladies and gentlemen, I have saved the best to last. You know that one about the news saying, dog bites man isn't a story, but man bites dog is? Well, I actually have a man bites dog story as promised, and that's dog shoots man. Here we are. A dog shot its owner in Tennessee after jumping on a gun trigger, causing it to discharge. I'm sorry. I am a wicked old lady, but the thought of a man and discharge in bed together, that was just too much. All right, Memphis police responded to an emergency call from a man who told them he was lying in bed with a gun. I know you guys in America are a little gun happy, but what is this? Full Metal Jacket or something? He was lying in bed with a gun when his dog jumped up, causing the weapon to fire. His 1-year-old pit bull, I tell you, those pit bulls are dangerous dogs. Oreo leapt onto the bed. How much do you want to bet that dog has a little black patch and white next to him? I mean, people, come on, use a bit more imagination. Leapt onto the bed and got his paw stuck in the trigger guard of his gun. Do you think that was entirely a coincidence, an accident, or do you think the dog was actually trying to off his owner? As a result, the gun went off and a bullet grazed the top of Mr. Kirkwood's left thigh, according to local news station WREG. Following the incident, a woman who'd been in bed with Mr. Kirkwood... I didn't get that far down the article. So let's get this straight. There's a man in bed with a woman and a gun. I mean, look, I take my snarky comments where I can get them. Britain is in serious trouble right now, and it's all very depressing. But when I can make fun of Americans, and America has Trump, it's very difficult to make fun of America now. But here, I have my choice. You Americans are total nuts, complete nutters. A man in bed with a woman and a gun and a dog. There's, goodness me. Anyway, yeah. The Memphis Police Department said the officers were able to locate one shell casing on the front room floor. Front room? Bed? Okay. I am wondering now if maybe the woman shot the man and he's trying to protect her. What do you think? Do you think they should fingerprint the woman and the dog? The woman, who was not named, told Fox 13 the dog is a playful dog and likes to jump around and stuff like that. And it just went off. Yeah. That's what every man says after he said he'd be careful. Asked whether she was woken by the gunshot or because Oreo jumped on the bed, she said it was a combination of the two. In future, the woman said, she would keep the safety on. She would keep the safety on. So does that mean she had the gun? Or use a trigger lock to ensure the weapon didn't go off and cause further injury. It's the latest in a long line of incidents in the US in which guns have accidentally been discharged by pets. Richard Rem from Iowa was shot in the leg in 2018 by a gun tucked into his waistband while playing with his pit bull Labrador crossbreed. I did hear a story a long time ago of a fellow who shot himself in the foot getting his gun out of his holster, went to the hospital, got strapped up, came home and then shot himself in the other foot, showing his friends how he did it the first time. One shouldn't laugh. This is injury, isn't it? In 2019, Matt Branch, a former Louisiana State University football player, oh God, that's awful, had to have his leg amputated and spent 12 days in a coma after his black Labrador stepped on a shotgun while out hunting, shooting him in the leg. I was happy to be alive rather than mad I lost my leg, Mr. Branch told Mississippi Clarion Ledger. Oh yeah, no, sorry, that's not funny. That's not funny at all. But the other stories are funny. Okay, well, yeah, that's from the grab bag. And, till next time. You can help my channel by subscribing and clicking the notification bell. That's quite important. And by sharing if you're so inclined. Links to my other channels and to donation methods are in the description. But the best way you can help is simply by clicking like and notify. Thank you.